Jake stood beneath the fading amber sky of a small-town gas station, his calloused hands gripping the old pump handle. The rhythmic clicking of the meter echoed louder than it should have, each sent a reminder of how tight things had become. He had just enough crumpled bills to get a few gallons, enough to last the week, if he was careful. His truck, rusted and stubborn, coughed slightly as it idled. The smell of gasoline hung in the warm air. Inside the cab, his 6-year-old daughter Lily sat patiently in the back seat, hugging a worn-out teddy bear whose stuffing had long since started to leak through the seams. She gave her father a sleepy smile when their eyes met through the rearview mirror. He smiled back, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Across the lot, a sleek patrol car pulled in. Out stepped a young police officer, clean-cut, polished, and freshly confident. Officer Mason had a reputation in town not for kindness, but for his sharp tongue and quick judgments. He leaned against his cruiser, sipping coffee from a paper cup, watching Jake like someone might observe a stray dog, curious, mildly disgusted, but not quite invested enough to do anything about it. As Jake replaced the pump and tapped the hood of the truck. Gently, half prayer, half habit, he heard the officer scoff. Some people shouldn't have kids if they can't even afford gas, Mason muttered, just loud enough. Jake froze, his back tensed, shoulders rising slightly, but he didn't turn. He stared down at the gas-stained concrete. The words landed like a slap, sharp, stinging, and cruel, not because they were original, but because they were spoken in front of Lily. He could feel her watching. He could have said something. He could have yelled back, reminded Mason he'd been laid off when the factory closed, that he worked 2 part-time jobs now and still found time to help Lily with her reading each night. He could have told him that being broke and being a bad father weren't the same thing. But Jake had long ago learned that dignity wasn't about loud rebuttals. It was about what you carried and what you chose to leave behind. So instead, he took a deep breath. He wiped his greasy hands on the side of his jeans and turned toward the truck. He offered Lily the warmest smile he could muster. She beamed back. That smiles more trusting and full of love meant more to Jake than any insult Mason could throw. His daughter didn't see a poor man. She saw a protector, a hero, the one person who never gave up on her. Jake climbed in and started the engine, which sputtered before reluctantly roaring to life. He pulled away slowly, past the officer without a glance, refusing to give Mason the satisfaction of seeing any pain. Pride wasn't always loud, it was often quiet, worn like a shield over bruised hearts. Behind him, Officer Mason rolled his eyes and took another sip of coffee, utterly unaware that in just a few minutes, his life and his perspective would change forever. Jake had barely driven 3 blocks from the gas station when the world around him shattered. The first gunshot cracked through the summer air, like a lightning strike. Then came another, and another. A woman screamed in the distance. Sirens howled from somewhere nearby, getting louder by the second. Tires screeched. Shouts echoed off the narrow streets. The sleepy town had been yanked wide awake. Jake's grip on the steering wheel tightened instinctively. His heart jumped to his throat. He glanced into the rearview mirror. Lily, her eyes were wide, clutching her teddy bear tighter, sensing something was wrong but not quite understanding. Her tiny mouth trembled. Jake forced his voice to steady. It's okay, baby. We're okay, he said, more to himself than to her. Up ahead, a blur of red and blue lights tore past a police cruiser, sirens blaring. It was Officer Mason. He was speeding toward the chaos, radio in hand, face tight with tension. The same man who had mocked Jake minutes ago was now barreling into something dangerous, something real. Jake's truck crept forward, but then instinct kicked in. He pulled sharply to the curb and slammed the gear into park. Something twisted in his gut, a feeling, a knowing. He turned and looked at Lily, her wide brown eyes searching his face. Lily, listen to me, he said gently but firmly. I need you to do something really important. She nodded slowly. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me. Not for anyone, okay? She didn't speak, just nodded again, trembling. Jake kissed her forehead, grabbed the tire iron from under his seat, his only weapon, and stepped out into the street. The door closed behind him with a hollow thud. The air was thick now. Sirens screamed, glass shattered in the distance, and Jake ran not away, but toward the sound. He didn't think about what Officer Mason had said. He didn't think about whether help was on the way. He didn't even think about the fact that he had nothing but a metal rod in his hands. All he thought about was this. Someone was in danger. and doing nothing was not an option. Asterisk fear pulsed through his veins, but he pushed it down, not because he was fearless, but because someone had to be brave. And he'd learned a long time ago that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to act anyway. Asterisk back in the truck. Lily watched her father disappear around the corner, tears sliding silently down her cheeks, clutching her teddy bear like it was the only thing keeping her whole. Asterisk, the man who barely had enough gas to get home, was now sprinting into Gunfire without a badge, without armor, just the weight of love and the will to help. Asterisk, the alley behind the convenience store was chaos. Sirens echoed, car alarms blared, and the smell of burning rubber clung to the air. Bullet casings glinted like fallen stars on the cracked pavement. Jake crouched behind a dumpster, heart pounding in his ears, breath ragged from the sprint. Asterisk, then he saw him, Officer Mason, lying half behind his patrol car, clutching his side. Blood seeped between his fingers, pooling beneath him. His face, so cocky and cold just minutes before, was now pale with fear. His radio lay shattered. He was alone, exposed, and utterly human. Asterisk, a burst of gunfire rang out from across the latitomatic, sharp, relentless. Mason ducked, groaning, dragging himself a few inches. He looked up and locked eyes with Jake. Asterisk, there was a beat, a frozen second where time held its breath. Asterisk, recognition flickered in Mason's gaze. Shame followed fast. The man lying in the alley, bleeding, had laughed at Jake, belittled him, looked down on him, but none of that mattered now. Jake didn't flinch. He didn't ask, didn't hesitate. He dropped low and crawled through shattered glass, over shards of metal, the tire iron abandoned behind him. He moved with only one goal: get to him, get him out. Asterisk, bullets cracked above his head. One hit the squad car with a deafening ping. Jake winced but kept going. Asterisk, he reached Mason, slid an arm under his shoulders, and whispered, "You're not dying today." Asterisk, Mason stared up, dazed. Why are you helping me?" Asterisk, Jake didn't answer. He just gritted his teeth, hoisted the officer's dead weight up with trembling arms, and started dragging him inch by painful inch toward the brick wall that offered cover. Asterisk, a bullet whizzed by and grazed Jake's arm. He hissed in pain but didn't stop. His shirt darkened with blood, not his first wound, not the worst, but he kept his body angled in front of Mason's, shielding him. Asterisk, when they finally reached the safety of the wall, Jake collapsed beside the officer, panting. Mason clutched at his vest, chest heaving. He looked at Jake, eyes swimming with disbelief and something deeper: respect, maybe even regret. Asterisk, Jake leaned back, blood trickling down his temple, his voice rough but steady. "You're going to be okay. Stay with me." Asterisk, in that moment, surrounded by chaos and pain, there were no uniforms, no poverty, no pride, not just one man saving another, not because he had to, but because it was right. The soft hum of the ambulance engine barely cut through the ringing in Jake's ears. Night had fallen, and flashing red lights bathed the interior in a haunting rhythm. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of antiseptic blood and sweat. Officer Mason lay strapped to a stretcher, an oxygen mask pressed to his face. His uniform soaked in red, but the bleeding finally under control. Asterisk, Jake sat beside him, his own arm bandaged hastily, shirt torn and face smudged with dirt and dried blood. He leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "You're gonna be okay," he said. More promise than observation. Asterisk, Mason turned his head slightly, the motion slow and painful. His eyes searched Jake's face, not out of suspicion, but out of disbelief. "You saved my life," he rasped, voice cracking. "After what I said to you." Asterisk, Jake looked down for a moment, swallowing hard. He could have said 100 things, could have reminded Mason of his cruel words, of the judgment he wore like a badge. But that wasn't who Jake was. That wasn't the example he wanted to leave behind. Asterisk, so he looked back up, eyes calm, heart full, and answered simply, "Because my daughter deserves to grow up in a world where we still help each other." Asterisk, silence filled the back of the ambulance. Not awkward, not empty, just deep. Asterisk, Mason blinked, the shame in his expression impossible to hide. He turned his gaze toward the ceiling, eyes glassy. No words came because, what could he say? That single sentence from Jake had stripped everything away: ego, status, pride, and left only the truth. Asterisk, in that quiet space, something shifted. A man once fueled by judgment was now disarmed by kindness. And a father who had nothing gave everything, not for recognition, but for the hope that his little girl would live in a better world than the one that had wounded them both. Asterisk the ambulance kept moving. Sirens off now, as the night wrapped around them two men once strangers, divided by assumption now connected by something far more powerful than words. Asterisk the sun had just begun to set, casting a golden glow over the modest front porch of Jake's small weathered home. The wooden steps creaked softly as he sat there, a mug of black coffee in hand, watching Lily draw chalk hearts on the sidewalk. Her giggles echoed like music in the warm evening air. A car door closed in the distance. Jake looked up, and there he was, Officer Mason, dressed in uniform. But something was different. His posture was softer. His eyes, no longer sharp with judgment, now carried something else entirely: humility, gratitude, and respect. Asterisk Jake stood as Mason approached, holding 2 grocery bags and an envelope tucked under one arm. For a brief second, neither spoke. Then Mason offered a small, genuine smile. Asterisk didn't think a thank you card was enough, he said, lifting the bags. Figured you could use a few things. Asterisk Jake hesitated, then nodded. You didn't have to. Asterisk I know, Mason said quietly, but I wanted to. Asterisk Lily looked up from her drawings and spotted him. Without a second thought, she ran to him, wrapping her little arms around his leg. You're the man my daddy helped, she said, eyes bright. Asterisk Mason froze, visibly moved. He knelt, placing a hand on her shoulder. And your daddy, he's a hero. Asterisk Jake swallowed the lump in his throat. This time he didn't need to look away. This time there was no shame, only pride. Asterisk Mason rose and handed Jake the envelope. Inside was a note from the precinct, a formal letter of thanks and a job offer. Asterisk maintenance supervisor. Mason said, we need someone reliable. Someone who shows up, even when it's hard. I told them I knew the right guy. Asterisk Jake stared at the letter, speechless. It wasn't just a job, it was dignity, stability, a chance. Asterisk after a long pause, Jake finally smiled, not out of politeness, not to hide pain, but a real, full smile filled with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Asterisk the two men shook hands. No words were needed beyond that. The world hadn't changed overnight, but in this little corner of it, something had healed. Asterisk as the sun dipped below the trees, Lily skipped back to her chalk drawings. Jake watched her, then looked at Mason. Thanks for coming, he said. Mason nodded. Thanks for showing me what it means to be a better man. Asterisk and just like that, a new chapter began, rooted, not in the past, but in what they chose to build together: respect, compassion, and a small, powerful promise that kindness will always have a place in this world. Asterisk.